Hey, what's up? This Dealio. I'm back again with another video, and this is why I don't use Pro Tools anymore. Yes, this is another one of those type of videos, and just like all the other videos where I talk about things I don't really use anymore, it's not a rag or hate of them, and I hate that I have to keep on saying it. I'm probably not going to say it anymore because people on the internet going to take it any way they want, no matter how much I try to cushion the blow or cushion whatever type of outtake they're going to take from that. There's not really anything I could do about it. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Pro Tools, right? Pro Tools is the industry standard. Pro Tools was a big thing coming up. And, I want to talk about my experience with Pro Tools. And I definitely want to hear your experience about Pro Tools in the comment section below. And let's compare experiences. Let's see if you like it. If you don't like it, it's your thing. See, I learned about Pro Tools mainly in Full Sail when I was in Full Sail. And it was the industry standard. You had to have Pro Tools HD1, HD2, HD3, and I can remember one time I was at the end of the program at Full Sail. I was getting Pro Tools certified, and you only get 3 tries to do it, and definitely my resources was limited, and I had the whole study book and paid for the certification. I failed the first time, and I had to regroup. And that was before I really had a good skill in studying, because a lot of stuff I just kind of took to naturally, but a lot of details I couldn't quite get to. But the second time I took the Pro Tools certification, I got it, and it was a big deal. That was when Pro Tools was DigiDesign, and it wasn't Avid at the time. It was DigiDesign, and it was a great program, and I had a lot of fun with it. And you really felt like you were doing something when you had that program coming up. So in my Full Sail days, that was the big go-to. And then the transition of getting that home, because the saying was, the word was, it's like, you're not a professional until you got Pro Tools. You're not going to be taken seriously until you're using Pro Tools. So all that cakewalk stuff, all this other stuff you're messing with, you're not going to be taken seriously until you got Pro Tools. And I bought into that sort of belief system, that religion of Pro Tools being everything. And the thing is that Pro Tools was a Mac only thing. So here I am, a guy who really grew up only around PCs, learning about Pro Tools and wanting to have that edge as a music producer, as an artist, as an engineer. And so in order to have Pro Tools, you had to have a Mac. Pro Tools wasn't really on PC. I think that eventually changed, but mainly Pro Tools was a Mac thing coming up. And it made you want a Mac really bad, and Macs were expensive back then, just how they are now. Definitely not as hard to acquire a new Mac for me as it was back then, but that was an expensive proposition. And then Pro Tools at the time was a very exclusive platform, because not only did you have to get the software, you had to use it if you wanted to get it home and you didn't have the big TDM systems of the time. You had to have the inbox. Anybody you remember the inbox, and then the inbox 2, and then the DigiDesign 001 and 002 rack and the 002 mixer. Those peripherals were expensive. Going in the PCI slot of your computer, and I was getting the inbox for the PC, because that was when they finally started having it on the PC, and I can remember having all kinds of buffer issues with it. It was a pain, but I wanted Pro Tools because you had to have Pro Tools. You had to have that system set up if you want to work with the professionals. If you want to be all that, you got to have Pro Tools. That was the whole belief system at the time. And for me, Pro Tools didn't really get accessible for me at home until they finally started doing Pro Tools Empowered. I don't know if any of you remember Pro Tools Empowered, but that was the bridge gap for me, because finally the audio interfaces were sort of in my range. M Audio at the time was making more universal audio interfaces, and so that bridged the gap. So now I could use the M Audio 410, which was Firewire, and that thing was just awesome. It was a lot of fun, a lot of IOs, and it really felt like you had a very serious piece of gear, even though it was priced more affordably. And it gave you phantom power, and even the inbox gave you phantom power at the time. And it was a lot of fun. And then you had to have the key. I don't know if y'all remember that key. I forget what it was called, the thumb drive. It's not even called a thumb drive, but it was that key you had to use with Pro Tools, because when you started Pro Tools, you had to have the key to start the programs to protect from copyright protection. And it just kept going on, and it was just a thing. And but after a while, it got kind of tiring because you had digital audio interface errors, and it was this whole thing where, okay, if you want to use Pro Tools, you got to make sure you record on a certain external drive or this drive or that drive. Your plugins had to be a certain time away. You had to have the RTAS plugins. And it just became such a pain to just keep running on my consumer level computers. I didn't have access to a lot of Macs. I eventually got a Mac Mini, and that was a pretty solid piece. But even then, with a Mac Mini, there were still issues keeping everything running when all I wanted to do was just record in a consistent way. All I wanted to do was create. But here I am dealing with audio interface engine issues and making sure this file works here and that way, and to make sure my key is in the thing. I know somebody in the comments go, let me know what that key thing is. I cannot remember what the name was. That thing, that dongle, was it a dongle or something like that you plugged in to make sure Pro Tools would run? And that was big, man. That was a big deal, and those dongles were expensive. I just can't remember the name of them right now. I'm sure someone in the comments, and I'm sure there's multiple comments. Feel free. It's not gonna bother me or anything like that. But after a while, Pro Tools would crash, and I was switching to this new hard drive, and now it was just a lot of work just keeping it all running. It was just a pain to just keep running and dealing with the plugins, and then this plugin worked, and then that plugin stopped working, and it almost got to a point where when I was working with Pro Tools, I knew that if it broke this certain type of way, I got used to it, or saying that this had this error. And honestly, I could have probably researched more to make it a little bit more seamless of an experience. But sometimes, for me, I just didn't want to keep fixing something. I just wanted it to work. And so I was really struggling. And a guy I knew told me about Studio One. And I'm like, Studio One, what is that all about? And I didn't really want to switch to Studio One. I was actually so entwined in the Pro Tools that I was used to how it breaks. So if it broke a certain type of way or didn't work or had an error, okay. If it didn't load up this right, okay, I did it like that. Then I had all these ways to keep Pro Tools running while I was dealing with all the issues. And so if you're like me, you ever have like a setup to where you got your stuff set up and there's something wrong with it, that it doesn't work right, but but it's your setup, how it's supposed to mess up when it does, how it's supposed to run, and you don't want to change it. And that was my attitude towards Studio One at the time. I didn't want to change it. I know that I'm struggling with Pro Tools. I know I'm dealing with buffer issues. The computer's having a hard time running it. And the interesting thing was that I finally broke down and switched over into Studio One, and then Studio One just ran so great on my Mac Mini at the time because I was doing the boot camp on the Mac Mini. So I was running Mac and Windows on the same time on the Mac Mini, just trying to make it all work with what I could get my hands on. And it just made my Mac Mini just run like crazy because it just felt like it was a lot lighter program. The processor wasn't working so hard, and I was still running a lot of plugins. I was like, wow, this is awesome, and I can use whatever drive I want. I don't have to use a specific drive, because when I was running Pro Tools at the time, you had to have a specific external drive. You couldn't use external drives. It was this whole thing. I don't remember it all. I'm actually kind of glad I forgot it, because it was just a pain to make sure to have the drives working and all the stuff. When I went to Studio One, I was actually fooling around and recording on the network drives and then didn't care. It was just sending the data back, and it was actually a cool experience. And I was testing it out, and I had a network drive set up, and I told Studio One to record that. And after a while, I started getting hooked to Studio One. I was like, wow, this is great. This is like how I wish Pro Tools would run. And I never looked back ever since. And I know that Pro Tools is still a highly known, highly sought after program. And I think they have also switched over to the subscription format, where you can't buy a perpetual license or copy of it. And I know that I probably sound old school saying this, but I like having music software where I buy it one time and I just use it and that's it. Like, for example, like I'm like a version behind on Studio One. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm a version behind on Studio One. I think we're like on Studio One 5 now, and I'm still chilling at 4. And the reason that I'm still chilling at 4 is because it works. The reason I'm chilling at the end user isn't going to hear the difference between Studio One, 4, and 5, in my opinion. It's all about how you use the tools and how you EQ and how you mix it. And I like that because I spent money for that software. It works. They did a good job. So I understand that a lot of companies want to go to more of a subscription model to keep the revenue coming in, because they know that if you make something good enough and you make sure it doesn't break, then people don't buy it again. And, I guess that's kind of a trade-off. I would think that if you made a product good enough, that maybe the reputation itself will help the user base tell more people about that product, and then they'll also buy it too. And that's always been sort of a thing with that. But I know that a lot of companies are doing subscription-based, but they're still doing a kind of like a hybrid thing. I personally like buying my stuff one time and having it forever, so that I can use it and not worry about it and it not breaking. And that's sort of been like my transition from why I don't use Pro Tools like how I used to, is because after a while it just got so, for lack of a better term, just so bureaucratic, because it was just so much. You have to be like this, and this plugin has to be this way, and it was constricting. It was constricting, even though it's a very powerful software, and I know that's very well used. And if you set me in front of a Pro Tools rig now, I can still keep up with you and catch up with whatever's new that's going on and use it, because every user has their muscle memory as far as like how they like to use it. So for me, if you sit me in the studio, I'm not going to hate on anybody for still using it. That's silly. I don't know. I'm not going to diss any, you use Pro Tools. So no, I'm not really on that anymore. But I do know for me, in my setup, in my rig, I like Studio One just fine. It does a great job. I have a lot of fun with it. I probably don't use Studio One to the full extent that I could. There's always more, and that's a good thing about a lot of these programs. Pro Tools, Studio One, Logic, Reaper, all of these programs probably have so much depth to them that you can really do a lot of different stuff with them. And there's always some new shortcut and new trick you can do with it. And that's why it's always good to try and keep an open mind and try different platforms. I'm glad I tried Studio One, because who knows where I'd be right now, still trying to make Pro Tools work. I'd probably be under a subscription or something, or just some other I probably would have went to hardware. And that was another thing. I probably would have went to hardware to record my music, because I was so tired of operating systems crashing, reinstalling operating system, reinstalling plugins, all that stuff. I was like, let me just get a hardware piece of gear that's dedicated to do one thing well. Thankfully, I didn't have to go that route. Once that Studio One revealed to me that my hardware was just fine, I just needed some software that was a little bit better coded, better written. So that's my story as to why I don't use Pro Tools anymore. I'd like to hear your opinion about that. Hit the like button, subscribe button. Let me know what else you'd like to see on this channel, and let me know your experience with Pro Tools. You still use it? Do you think it's the best? Who's killing it right now? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you later. I'm Dilio, and you're watching Dilio T2K.